So this video is going to demonstrate how to change out a dial on a Commandersky, the one that doesn't have an automatic wind up on it. This is something I had laying around. I bought it for parts only. Obviously a political statement, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't give a rat's ass about politics. Never have, never will. Um, Fairly simple to do with basic tools. The first thing I like to do is let's see, mount this up in a movement holder. You don't have to have a movement holder or case holder. This is basically a case holder. You don't have to have one, but it makes life a lot easier to handle, grab onto it, what have you. Sometimes, if you notice these, there's a little foot right there that you can grip into a vise. Sometimes these can be really tight and you gotta chuck it up into a vise. The other tool you're going to need is a case back remover. This is something I got online for $10-15. It's got 3 points, has variable tips that can be changed, and it's just a matter of dialing in the distances here where they need to be. And then turn the third one in and get a good grip on it and just give it a turn. I obviously have this loose already, and once you get it to this point, it comes off fairly easily. Another set of tools you're going to need is some fairly fine screwdrivers, tweezers, hand removers, stuff like that. If you notice, I don't have any gloves on doing this procedure because this movement, like I said, is for parts. I don't care if I get smudges all over it. And there we go. I can knock that ring off. There's the case back. And there is a gasket as well. Take the gasket off. To get the movement out is fairly simple. The movement is just basically held in by the case back. There is a spacer ring that is held in by a screw on this position and then directly across over here. There's the spacer ring that I'm talking about. Takes up the distance between the movement and the case. We don't have to worry about that right now because we're taking that whole ring out, that whole assembly out altogether. The first thing you want to do is let down the mainspring. If you turn the crown, you can see this port here turn and get out of the way. That's called a click. Here's your ratchet wheel. You can see it. It's called a click because it clicks. You want to come in, release it, and gently let go of the stem, and it will let down the mainspring. There it is. You can give it a turn and it won't come back and forth. Eventually the balance right here will stop. Now let's get that stem out. If you notice right there, that's a button. We're going to push on that button. Let's get the stem out as far as it'll go. The stem is in this position. Before we do that, let's line up our hands. Let's line up our hands right about there so they're in line somewhat. And while pushing down on this button, it's got a little spring to it. You can extract the stem. There's the stem. Nothing to it. Very easy. Take the... You know what? I lied. I did lie. We're going to have to take that ring off. So we're going to flip this over. And there it is. There's your movement. Normally, if you're going to do this on a piece that doesn't need servicing, you're going to use gloves or something that's not going to transfer fingerprints to the dial. We do have to take that ring off now that I remembered. So this part, you're going to need something to protect the dial. I have something from Auto Friel that just slides in. Yeah, if I could do it the proper way. You don't have to run it in all the way. And this is called a hand remover. Just kind of grums in and grabs and takes it right off, takes everything off. I like to do one at a time. There's one, the second hand, obviously. And then we're going to come in, do the minute hand, off that comes. Now sometimes you'll have something like this. There's not a whole lot of space to get in there to grab that hour hand. It's seated a little deeper than usual. What I like to do, let's get a different screwdriver. Make sure I'm in the shot. I'll come in with a screwdriver and I will nudge this back and forth with the screwdriver on each side just to raise it up a little bit to allow our fingers to get under to remove the hour hand. Fairly simple. So there you go. Easy enough. Now I like plastic holders for these because they don't damage anything. They're not going to scratch up this dial. So I'm going to turn this over like so, and we do have to remove that ring. You don't have to take both screws out. We're going to take one out and loosen the other. This one we're going to loosen. Okay, couple of turns, that's loose. We come to the other side. That one we're going to remove all the way. Take the screw out and basically you can lift off the ring. There's our spacer ring, movement holder spacer ring. And the reason we had to get to that is the dial feet are screwed into, let me turn that over, are screwed in the radial side of the movement. There it is. There's a shot of it right there. These are very small screws. I use my smallest screwdriver and back them out a few turns. And there's one directly across from it, 180 degrees out. Do the same thing for the other side. And that should release it from the movement. You should be able to put the movement down and pick up the dial. And there you have it. The dial is removed. These are dial feet, dial studs, whatever you want to call them. Those are the parts that grip the screw grips. And here is an inside look of the movement. The one thing to be critical of, don't lose this wave washer right here. This little guy keeps tension on that wheel. That is called the minute wheel, and that's just sitting on there. The dial helps hold that in place. Another thing to be conscious of, you have a wheel here. That's going to fall out if you aren't careful. So I like to take the stem and put it in, but don't put it in all the way that you have to undo it. Just put it in there that it's holding on to it in case you flip the movement over. Grab your new dial, whichever you're placing, and obviously the stem is right here, 3 o'clock position. Line it up and those dial feet should fall right into place. And I like to pick it up. You don't have to lean on this dial. You're just holding this in place. Just hang on to it. There's our dial foot screw. Turn that in till it's tight. Turn it to the other side. Here's our other screw. Do the same for that. And there you have it. That is installed. There's probably a fingerprint on this by now, but I don't care. Like I said, this is a political thing. I ain't political. Okay, now back to our plastic movement holder. We're going to put this in upside down like so. We're not going to lock it in. We're just going to have it resting on the top. Just resting. We're going to take our stem out. Turn this around. The spacer ring is going to go next. Just remember, there's an opening in that spacer ring right over here for the stem. And I'm going to put the stem in, but I'm not going to install it. It's just going to allow me to line everything up so I know where that spacer ring goes. And you want to center that spacer ring so the opening for the stem right here is centered with the stem. And now that we have that, we can put in, let's see if I can get this in the shot. There's a good shot. We can get that in, get the screw started. Come on. Sometimes these can be a bugger to drop in. A little bit of patience is all you need, and a little bit of practice. So I don't run these in tight. I leave them a little bit loose because I want to check the spacing of that ring. I'm going to open this up a bit. If you notice, I can move that ring back and forth, and I got it centered in the opening on the stem. Then I'll come in and tighten up those mounting screws. Okay, hang on. I think I ran one in a little too tight. All right. Yes, I did. Let me loosen that one. These spacers fit on a ledge. You just have to make sure it's on that ledge properly seated. I did not. That's why I had to mess with it. Here we go. Back in business. Like a little shelf it sits on. Let's focus. We're going to check our spacing. Make sure these are loose. You can see how it can float right there. That's pretty centered. And I'll come in, tighten that one. Here's the other side. Okay, that one's tight. This one's tight. Done. The stem is not fully installed. That's just loosey-goosey sitting there. So the next thing we're going to do, we have to set hands. Now to do that, we're going to have to install the stem. And that's just a matter of giving it a wiggle. Give it a turn, push it in while depressing that button that we depressed to remove it. Turn it a few times. Give it a click back and forth. Okay, there we go. Our click is working. Come out to this position. And now we can set hands. Hand setting, you're going to need a device to do that. You don't have to have a hand setter. You can make do with anything that's got a plastic tip. To install that, you're just going to put it on there and lean on it. But we have to line it up as well. So I just pick the hour hand, lay it on there, doesn't matter where it goes. Center it up, lean on it. Take a look at it in this view to make sure it's not interfering with the dial, and then I run it to 12 o'clock. We run it to 12. All right. Looks pretty good. Lined up at 12. And then we place the minute hand on top, lined up at 12 as well. I like to lay it in there gently. I guess I was out of the shot. I just laid it in there. Obviously it's not seated. I'm going to nudge it into place. Make sure it's lined up with everything. And come in with my tweezers. Center it up. And with that, it'll hold place. It's just not permanent. It's not a good, actually not at all. See how it popped off? Probably shouldn't have done that. So we start over. We're going to line that up like so. Let's come into our movement, our hand setter. Gently add a little pressure so it does hold on to it. And then check our alignment. Does this line up at 12 o'clock? Yes, it does. Now I'm going to come back here. Give it a little more pressure to make sure it's seated. These are very delicate, these movements. You don't have to kill it. It'll just seat right on there. Those look pretty parallel. They look nice, actually. That's how it should look. So I like to check them at 12 and then come around to the 3 o'clock position. Everything's lined up. Come here to 6 o'clock. Very nice. Now the last hand to go on is the second hand. There's various ways to do this. Everybody has their own way. When it comes to the Vostoks, they have that little anti-stutter spring that preloads the gear and has a little spring to this. As you can see, it's springy. So I have my own way of doing it. Some people may not like what I do. It works for me. Haven't had any problems. I bring it in here and I put the dial, the movement right there on the base, and I come in and I'll lean on it a little bit, but it's really not seated. So I come back and I turn the movement upside down and gently lay it on the base, and there's the pinion where it's mounted to. I come in, give that a little nudge. Doesn't take much. Doesn't take much at all. Here we are back in the holder. While we're doing that, we can put it in the holder. We can take a look. Check for the alignment. Check for any spacing issues. Those look pretty good. That's pretty nice. I would be happy with that. That would work. There would be no interference. Has the right curvature to both hands. That's looking good. Now, I like to put everything back here around the 3 o'clock position. Let's get that out of the way because we need to remove our stem. Here's our padded work surface. Everything is over at the 3 o'clock position, so when I come like this, I can lean on the movement right here just a bit, because I'm going to simultaneously push that button and release this spring from the stem like so, and out it comes. There's our movement. For putting the movement back into the case, I'll put it right on a gloved hand like so. 3 o'clock at 3 o'clock position, and I take the case right on top, flip it over. There you have it. It's in the case. You're gonna come in here with your stem. It's close. Find its way through. Give it a turn, back and forth, back and forth. We're gonna lean on that button once again, and it snaps in. Another thing I like to do in this position, I like to push the stem in with my finger, take the movement and push it against that stem. Make sure it's seated. And another test is going to be, you can come out to the second position to set the hands, and when you push it back in, you can wind the mainspring. And that's all there is to changing out the dial on one of these. If you have a chance to regulate it, if you have a time grapher to regulate it, now's the time to do it. If not, it's running good. Put everything back. Gasket, case back, and then lock in your ring with your watch back remover, and there you have it. That is a non-date Kommanderski hand cranker, I like to call these. And if you feel like you want to give it a try, give it a tackle, go to it. It's not that hard to do. Very simple. Hopefully this helps. The next one, I'm going to show you how to do an auto winder with date.